Week 2 is in the books, so that means it's time to hit those waiver wires to find players that could add value to the back end of your rosters. And first and foremost, I want to highlight a couple of players that are already highly rostered in Dynasty leagues, but not exactly 100% that I think need to be. And that includes Mac Jones, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, quarterbacks for the Cleveland Browns, LaQuint Allen, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Troy Franklin, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, Michael Wilson, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, Noah Fant, tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals, and Theo Johnson, tight end for the New York Giants. Again, all of these guys are already very highly rostered in well over 90% of Dynasty leagues out there, but not exactly 100%. So double check your waiver wires and immediately add these guys if they are available. All right, 2 weeks into the 2025 NFL season, we've already seen a handful of backup quarterbacks get pretty significant playing time with the probability of even more starts in the future. I already highlighted Mac Jones, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders just a second ago in the double check section because Mac Jones may start another game or two and was great for fantasy football this week in Brock Purdy's place. Then in Cleveland, just seems inevitable that Joe Flacco is going to be benched for Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders as the future starter, as we've now seen Kevin Stefanski's willingness to pull Flacco at the end of games. But this Sunday, we also had two other quarterback injuries during games this week, both of which include backup quarterbacks that I already highlighted 2 weeks ago as stashes to add prior to the season started in anticipation for any potential injuries. So if you followed that advice then, you would already be ahead of the curve. In Cincinnati, Joe Burrow was roughly diagnosed with a turf toe injury after leaving before halftime, and in his stead comes Jake Browning, who already had massive fantasy success behind Joe Burrow before a couple years ago, but then today throws for 241 yards and 2 touchdowns, plus another 1-yard goal line rushing touchdown. He did throw 3 interceptions, but it was a 20-point fantasy performance on roughly 70% of the snaps played, and assuming that Joe Burrow misses more games with this turf toe injury, Browning is a potential top 12 fantasy quarterback with their next 3 games against the Vikings, Broncos, and Detroit Lions. Then in New York, Justin Fields returned to earth hard on Sunday, looked absolutely terrible against the Buffalo Bills, before then leaving early with a concussion. In his place came Tyrod Taylor, who completed 64% of his passes for 56 yards and a touchdown, plus rushed for 21 yards through only 2 drives. It was the most garbage of garbage time ever in any NFL game, but as I noted 2 weeks ago when I advised adding Tyrod before the season, I noted that even as recently as the end of 2023, Tyrod has been very fantasy relevant in games that he's played because of that rushing ability and just consistent and safe passing numbers. The Jets are going to jet, I understand that, but if Justin Fields misses 1 to 2 games with this concussion, Tyrod gets matchups against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Miami Dolphins, both of which seem to be plus matchups for quarterbacks right now. But of course, the major injury news on the week was from the Thursday night game after Austin Eckler suffered a torn Achilles that not only will end his 2025 season, but could also end his career, and I really hate to see him go out that way if that is the case. Now, obviously, everybody is clamoring over preseason darling Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, but JCM probably isn't going to be this entire backfield, meaning both Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols are good adds this week. Of the two, I might actually prefer McNichols, not only because he is just more widely available than Chris Rodriguez, but also if we assume JCM gets the 2-down work and they want an Eckler replacement in the receiving game, that is Jeremy McNichols' skill set. So McNichols might see more work when JCM is healthy. However, should JCM then get injured, Rodriguez would then take over his role as the 2-down guy and goal line guy, which also makes him a good add as the more next in line sort of handcuff in this Washington backfield. Now, looking at the wide receiver position, I'm actually a little surprised to see Jahan Dotson available in 35% of MFL leagues that I'm pulling from for these waiver wire data, not because he is producing well by any means, but because the opportunity is there for him in case of one injury ahead of him. Jahan Dotson is a solid wide receiver. He definitely did not live up to his draft capital nor his rookie season hype, but as a team wide receiver 3 and possible wide receiver 2 from any injury ahead of him, he should be rostered in pretty much all 25 to 30 plus man roster dynasty leagues. The fantasy season is already crazy to start the year, and it's only going to get crazier. We have seen AJ Brown miss time with injuries, and he was already injured coming into the season. We have seen Devontae Devontae Smith missed time with injuries, and he even visited the medical tent this week in week 2. Dallas Goedert currently injured, and that benefited the wide receivers this week, specifically Devonta Smith. So who knows what happens as the season goes on, but I do know things are always going to get weirder, they're going to get crazier, and perhaps even worse, and if a good player like Jahan Dotson is sitting on my waiver wire, I'm adding him. Similarly, KaVontae Turpin is in that same kind of role for the Dallas Cowboys as their talented wide receiver 3, who is just one injury away from a much larger role. Turpin is slightly more interesting to me than Jahan Dotson because I do think that you can play Turpin in an ultimate pinch when everybody's healthy in Dallas because he does kind of get decent usage. He's had 4 to 6 touches per game already. He caught a touchdown this week to go along with 47 yards, so that's 14 plus PPR points right there for him in week 2. He's also used as a rusher because of his speed, so it's a nice extra boost in floor if he can add 8 to 10 or even more yards on the ground. The Cowboys are a very good offense under Dak Prescott. They have a ton of passing volume, and if Turpin is going to get roughly 5 touches per game, that's basically the same as many other wide receivers you have on your bench right now, and he's talented enough to do something with those touches more often than not. So you can add KaVontae Turpin to your bench now in case of complete emergency later in the future, but should anything happen to CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens as the season goes along, Turpin's upside increases during any weeks he's acting as Dak Prescott's wide receiver 2.